Step inside Hangar 19.
What's going on? My name is Cutter. I'm the host of Hangar 19. This is the Hangar 19 podcast. Thank you so much for downloading it or streaming it or however it is you're listening to this. It doesn't even matter. The fact that you're listening to this is pretty cool. And it also means that you like heavy music. Hangar 19 is a 3-hour classic metal radio show heard across the United States, various radio stations, various cities. Follow us on Twitter at Hangar 19 Radio for times and stations and when we're on. That shows up, by the way, as a sidebar on Hangar19Radio.com. You can also join us on Facebook. It's Facebook.com/Hangar19Radio. You know how it works. I'm at Cutter Media, if you care, and I'm sure you don't. Jason Bieler is at Jason Bieler. Now, Jason Bieler, if you know the name, awesome. If you don't, let me refresh your memory. Jason Bieler is a guitar player and main songwriter for the band Saigon Kick. Now, I know Saigon Kick isn't the heaviest band in the world, but that's because you haven't given them a chance yet. Listen to the album The Lizard, and then come back and tell me that's not a heavy band. See, the problem is that you had an influx of bands in the early 90s. Some of them sounded like other bands, some of them did not. If any of them had a ballad, it was released as a radio single. In the case of Saigon Kick, it was a song called Love Is On The Way, and it's a song you still hear to this day everywhere you go. And there's nothing wrong with that. That means they're still getting paid. But don't judge that band on that song. They have a lot of great songs and a lot of great heavy tunes. Now, after Saigon Kick kind of went away, Jason took his experience, hooked up with his brother Aaron, and started a record label called Bieler Bros Records. They then went on to have much success with that record label. My good friends in Nonpoint were a member of that label for a long time. They've had some great bands. Ankla, Sixth, and he'll talk about it. Jason Bieler, from Saigon Kick to record label mogul on the Hangar 19 podcast. Jason Bieler, who is the guitar player for the band Saigon Kick and also record label owner, is joining us inside Hangar 19. Jason, thanks for taking some time to chat, man. Appreciate it.
No worries, man. Thanks for having me.
Not a problem at all. So first, let me start with Saigon Kick. You guys got back together a few years ago. How'd that come about?
Basically, the typical band, we hated each other's guts and wished evil things upon each other's lives.
Of course you did.
For extended periods of time. And then, we've had a few calls to maybe talk about doing a show here or a show there, and it just never really, for one reason or another, kind of came to fruition. And then last year, we decided to finally kind of see what we could do, and we put together like six or seven shows around the country, and it was just pretty overwhelming response as far as we were concerned, and it went real well, and we didn't kill each other, which was a huge victory in and of itself, and that's pretty much the long and short story of how it came about.
What obviously, you guys had the success in the late '80s and early '90s. I would
like you to readdress that by our record came out in '91.
Okay, early '90s. Sorry.
Yeah.
Well, you know what it is too. In Saigon Kick gets lumped in obviously with '80s bands, and partly I would assume because of the ballad "Love Is On The Way."
I like to think that we had the ballad that took down the entire hair metal movement.
There you go. It wasn't "Smells Like Teen Spirit." It was "Love Is On The Way."
Well, "Love Is On The Way" paved the way to Teen Spirit.
I love it.
Had we not oversaturated the market with hair metal at that particular point, Nirvana would have never had their moment to break.
So you made it possible for Nirvana.
I am directly responsible for Nirvana's success.
All right.
And thereby Pearl Jam and every other grunge band.
Right, and the fact that Dave Grohl is a god among men at this point, it seems like.
He owes it to me.
Right. All right. Well, that's good, Jason. But in all seriousness, I mean, obviously Saigon Kick gets lumped in with those bands, and if you sit and listen to those couple of records, there's some good just hard rock jams on there that are not at anything. I wouldn't compare them to a Poison song to Save My Life.
We kind of really did straddle, all joking aside, that kind of time period where we never really toured with the bands that really came before us in the hair metal scene so much, and really before the ballad had taken off. We toured with Ozzy. We toured with, believe it or not, we toured with the Ramones. We had done shows with Faith No More and the Godfathers, and
sure,
it just goes on. I mean, we were really more in that scene, a little bit more in that scene, even Soundgarden and stuff like that. And we really kind of always had pretty diverse records.
Right.
So there was kind of ballad-esque tunes on it, and heavy stuff, and weird stuff, and punky stuff, and but for better or worse, the ballad kind of exploded, and it became what it became, and people always ask, like, are you bummed out? I'm like, how do you ever get upset about the fact that one of your records went on to sell X amount of copies, and
right.
There's a good side to it, but it's just the way it is. I mean, you can't go back and explain to everybody, no, this isn't really like we are. I mean, I think Extreme, to a certain degree, suffered a similar fate in the sense that I think they weren't what I would consider a typical hair metal band.
No.
And, they were probably more known for more than words and to the masses than they were for the rest of their stuff.
Right, and Get the Funk Out is still a great song. I
Yeah.
don't care who you are. But yeah, I agree. There was definitely a level of those bands at that time. And you mentioned Faith No More, and it might have been the most popular of you guys who had sort of this influences ranging from where the songs were from funk to metal to punk to hard rock and kind of everything in between. It was really an interesting dynamic for a lot of bands like Saigon Kick.
Yeah, I mean, that was just, I mean, I guess at the time, I mean, the band that changed, I mean, for me, it shows you how far we missed, but we were shooting for, we really loved like Jane's Addiction. That was like the first heavy band I saw that wasn't silly. Meaning in the sense that it wasn't spandex and,
Right.
and hairspray, but they were still very, very heavy because, alternative music prior to that Soundgarden, Jane's Addiction era stuff was, it was Flock of Seagulls and Haircut 100, and it was definitively different. Alternative music didn't really have that heavy guitar-driven stuff. So, and even though I like to think of myself as a striking-looking guy, we were never a good-looking band, enough to really fit in the normal hair metal scene. So, when we saw these, for lack of a better word, lack of great-looking people playing extremely guitar-driven, heavy music in an interesting way, that's like when the light bulb went off for us. So we were aiming for, like a Jane's Addiction meets Queen, Beatle-y kind of thing. How close we got is for someone else's to argue about it, but that was the idea, that was the concept.
So what were you personally listening to when you were a kid and first decided to pick up a guitar and do the rock and roll thing?
I mean, the first like rock record being prior to like maybe listening to stuff with my parents, like 8 tracks and stuff like that. I'd have to say the one that made the influence on me was probably Kiss Destroyer.
Okay.
It was like the first time I was like, wow, this is amazing. And so, I mean, I really always listened to a ton of different stuff. I mean, the Beatles were obviously huge, Queen. But at the same time, I was listening to a lot of really diverse stuff. So I listened to Bjork, Tom Waits, Metallica, Ozzy. I really listened to almost everything. So I was never really that hung up on, a genre in particular as much as I just like, if the artist was great and was, did something that I thought was compelling, I mean, I was into it. I really could care less what the scene was at the time.
Well, that's kind of refreshing to hear because a lot of people who got into it, and maybe not the musicians that stand out, but as a kid, if you're in the scene, you're into. And I was just telling somebody else this earlier today. When I was a kid growing up and learning how to play guitar, it was all you either had your hair metal guys or girls, you had your thrash metal guys, which was the kind of category I fell into, or you had the punk rock people.
Right.
And it wasn't until it wasn't until a lot of bands like yourselves and Faith No More and stuff, Jane's Addiction especially, started coming out that sort of bridged that gap.
Yeah, I mean that's what's kind of funny about now. I think because I was growing up, you definitely culturally identified with the music you were listening to. So you were like not only musically in one department, but you were socially like that's who you hung out with. It was like metalheads or
put on your jean jacket with your patch on the back and go to town.
So it was everything in terms of your social identity. And now the coolest thing is, I mean, like hanging out and seeing just younger kids digesting music. I mean, they're going from Skrillex to AC/DC to Maiden to, I mean, there is no more rules. So strangely enough, it almost plays into a band like ours' favor more now than it did at the time because people don't care as much anymore. They'll go see Billy Joel and then they'll go see Jake Miller and then they'll go to the Metallica show. Like they just don't care. They just want to see great stuff. So, I think it's a more interesting and liberated time in music. Maybe because of it's just so available and, with whether it be via, piracy or Spotify, or you can just listen to anything at any time. That
Right.
I think people are a lot more open to anything now.
It's funny you say that too, because I have a teenage son who loves Wiz Khalifa and also Panic at the Disco and also AC/DC and also what metal. He just brought up some random metal band the other day that I would have never expected to come out of his mouth, and I can't remember which one it is. But at any rate, some really, really heavy band. And but you're absolutely right. I think that there are no rules.
To me, it's so cool because when we were kids, I mean, you'd be killed.
Oh, absolutely.
For all of a sudden showing up one day saying, "Hey, have you heard the new, whatever, Donnie and Marie record?" I mean, you were done. You still may be done.
I was just gonna say, if you still brought up a Donnie and Marie record to this day, you might be done. I'm not gonna lie.
Could be pushing the.
So, all right, well, bring me back. Okay, so Saigon Kick is having some success. You had a couple records out, obviously Lizard and self-titled, and then what happened? Because you guys then split up. You started hating each other.
Right, in a completely unheard of rock and roll story, we started to despise each other for every reason you can imagine that you've heard a billion times.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess shortly after we had finished the second record, we were going to record the third. Matt had felt that it had run its course, and so I wound up finishing the third record and took over vocals at that point, and just kept going on our merry way for a while, and went on to have some interesting success stories in different parts of the world, and just kept doing it. And it just kind of at a certain point, I started getting involved more in production and just artist development. And things like that. So as that started to kind of grow, and that particular moment in time started to not be as productive for Saigon Kick, and I clearly had no desire to wake up in a van behind some rock venue at 8 a.m, with that lovely smell that those rock venue dumpsters tend to kick off around 9 or 10 when the sun starts to come up. That was just not where I wanted to be. So I started to pursue other things, and kind of life took a turn for that, at that point.
All right, so obviously then, I mean, we're talking about, you started a record label called Bieler Brothers Records, you and your brother. Mm-hmm. I guess the process of going, I mean, you mentioned you didn't want to, obviously wake up in a sweaty van anymore, but to going from that world to the other world, because I don't know, I mean, as a band, you kind of record label guys are record label guys, so then to become one yourself.
Going to the dark side.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of weird because I've always been friends with a lot of the people that, when I started, I mean, a lot of the people that are now mega huge industry folks were people that were involved, like a guy like Jason Flom, who has signed, half of all the great rock records of all time, was starting at that time. And, we became really good buds. And as I always maintained, I really was never much for the rock star thing. I'm just, I do what I do, they do what they do, and we always just had good relationships. So as those relationships developed, we always stayed in touch, and I started to see opportunities. I mean, I don't even think it was that calculated. I shouldn't say it that way. I mean, I just when I find something great, I was like, okay, this is amazing. Now, how can I get 5 more people to think this is amazing? And I think that started to slowly create situations where I would call people that I knew and say, hey, I think this band's amazing, and that led to doing more records and producing more records, which ultimately led to some success. Some really good success stories for certain artists, and that led to an imprint with MCA, which eventually led to an imprint through Lama Records, and then the label became fully independent through Warner. At that point, it just kind of, I wish I could say there was a master plan, but it just kind of
snowballed,
naturally evolved.
That's awesome though, because I look at that story and love the success. Because when I started doing music at a radio station and getting records from Bieler Brothers, I'm like, Bieler, Jason Bieler. Wait a minute, the guy from Saigon Kick?
I should throw this out right away.
You're lucky I love Nonpoint, otherwise. But no, in all seriousness, I thought it's cool to see somebody from one world go to the other world, but all stay within music and do something they continually love. It's a great success story, I think.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I think it was advantageous for those bands early on. Still really good friends with Nonpoint guys, but it was. I mean, I had been in every club in the for the most part the rock touring world you'd experience. I had been to every radio station. I understood the dynamic. I understood what record people did and what they were trying to accomplish, and what artists, how artists drove them nuts. I understood how they drove artists nuts. I having lived it. And I think that was an advantage in many instances compared to most people who had never really done anything on the other side. I kind of was able to see the game a little bit more, I think just a little more broadly and understand maybe a little bit more of, what was going on. And
right.
I think that was an asset early on.
So is there one band that you've been able to sign and develop that sticks out in your mind as the kind of be-all, end-all of that part of your career?
Oof. I mean, I'm really, really proud of what we've done and who we've signed as a label. Some bands have gone on to, really good success stories, and some didn't do as well as I think they should have. And but I feel like we've done a great job of bringing some really amazing bands. I mean, we worked with Carnival and brought their first record to the U.S., and I think they're finally beginning to get their due now. Really, they're hitting their stride. Obviously, Nonpoint was a huge part of our family, and on is fantastic. And Sting is another band that super close with those guys, and the fact that they're still moving forward and making great music. I can Silent Film was a band in Alternative World that did really, really well. Uncle we had on Ozfest, and that was a good record. A band we signed that I'm really, really proud of is a band called Sick, S-I-K-T-H, and they really, I think, were the beginning of what became a very big genre, the gent movement and the progressive metal movement. I think their record will go down in history as that moment when metal became that. And I'm excited to know they're reuniting and doing a huge show at the Download Festival this year.
It's it's funny you mentioned Sixth because dude, I can't remember the lead singer's name for the life of me right now. I'm sorry, but he had that record with Adrian from Iron Maiden for Primal Rock Rebellion.
Oh yeah.
And the way Adrian talked about this guy was, I mean, you'd think he's a god among men as well. I mean, just incredible. And what talent.
Yeah, I mean, we had the good fortune of releasing an extremely, important subgenre record at the height of file sharing.
Okay.
But nonetheless, I mean, I think if you look at the numbers on it, it's probably one of the most, in terms of metal, it's one of the greatest pilfered musical pieces of all time. But still, I think it was a brilliant, brilliant record. Those guys are just out of control in terms of their musical ability, and those are the kinds of things that I think you look back. I mean, we worked with a band called Fiction Plane, which was actually Sting's son, which I thought made a brilliant record, and they actually supported the Police on the whole reunion tour, and we've been really fortunate. I mean, we've worked with a lot of great bands. I'm sure I'm skipping 3 or 4 that I'm just not
That's okay.
off my head, but. How much better does it get? I mean, I didn't have to get a real job, and I continued to work with amazing artists, and in some small way, participate in helping them get a little further.
So, all right, 2 things. Then, what's next on the record label side for Bieler Brothers or for you personally?
Well, we're signing a couple new bands this year that I'm probably going to announce in the next couple of weeks. The label's still kicking along and doing really well, so we're excited about obviously the path, but we're also excited about what's coming up next. On a personal front, I've been doing a lot of side project music. I've been writing again and releasing a lot of stuff just in a non-purposeful kind of wacky single every time I feel like it scenario. And that project's called the very marketable and commercial name Owl Stretching. Proving my...
Stretching.
Proving my Justin Bieber-like market timing.
Sure.
So that's been a lot of fun, and having different friends and stuff play on that. Saigon Kick's going to do a couple of major festivals, which are actually going to be announced in a couple of weeks. So, we're playing with some of the new younger gun bands at these big festivals. So we'll have to, put our walkers aside for a few minutes and see if we can still make it happen. And some stuff in Europe potentially, and just staying busy, writing, producing, all that kind of stuff.
Awesome. You can always feel young when you know Keith Richards just turned 70 and he's still alive, and Rolling Stone still tours.
I think someone brought up a great point. I can't remember what movie I was watching where they just said, he just gets a pass because he looks 70 at 30. So now that he looks 70 at 70, he still looks cool.
That's a great point. Jason Bieler, if you need to hit me up for music for ZOR, we can do that later.
Yeah, sure.
This has been fantastic, man. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat a bit.
Hey, I appreciate you taking the time to ask the questions, and I'll be talking to you, man.
Won't you one more time?